It started like any other normal day. People were waking up, rubbing their eyes, getting ready for work, school, or whatever the day had planned for them. The sun had just started to rise in most parts of the world. Birds were singing, traffic was picking up, and people were scrolling through their phones, checking the weather or reading messages. Nobody expected anything strange. There was no warning, no signal, no noise in the sky, just silence. And then everything changed in one blink. The first sign was a strange shadow moving over a quiet village. People looked up expecting clouds or maybe a large aircraft, but it wasn't anything they'd ever seen. It wasn't just big, it was massive. It didn't make a sound, but it blocked out the sunlight like a thick curtain pulled across the sky. In big cities, the same thing happened. Shadows began to stretch unnaturally across buildings, across streets. People looked up and froze. Traffic stopped. Phones were pulled out. Some thought it was a military test. Others thought it was some kind of floating city. But deep down, everyone felt the same thing: fear. It wasn't long before the world realized something was wrong. News stations tried to report, but many signals were already down. Satellites stopped responding. Internet speeds dropped suddenly. Military radars picked up objects entering Earth's atmosphere, but the data made no sense. These crafts weren't flying like planes or missiles. They were floating, drifting, silent, as if they weren't affected by gravity at all. Within hours, people across 5 continents had seen them, strange, black shapes hovering above cities and oceans. Not one, not two, but dozens, and still no contact. No message, nothing. People waited. Some panicked and ran. Others prayed. Some just stood there staring up, as if their brains couldn't process what they were seeing. Then came the first hit. A bright, white light, not like a bomb or a fireball, more like something surgical, clean, and terrifying. It dropped from the ship hovering above a major city. The light expanded out in seconds. There was no explosion sound, no shaking, no heat. But everything inside that white circle vanished. Buildings, cars, roads, people. Gone. Like they had been erased from reality. Screams followed. News anchors choked up while trying to report live. Fighter jets were scrambled. The world, once divided by politics, language, and borders, suddenly felt very small and very helpless. Across the globe, chaos broke out. People tried to flee cities. Roads were jammed. Planes were grounded. The governments gave orders to stay calm, but no one could. In some places, people turned to violence, looting stores, breaking into shelters, trying to save themselves and their families. In other places, silence took over. People just stayed inside, holding their loved ones, watching the sky, and above all, those crafts floated, watching, waiting, silent. Human weapons were useless. Missiles fired toward them were stopped mid-air, like frozen in time. Jets that tried to get close simply dropped out of the sky. Every move we made, they were already ahead of it. It was like they were reading our thoughts. Somewhere in the countryside, a man who had once served in the army stood on his porch, staring up. He had long left the military, choosing peace and quiet over war and noise. But in that moment, looking at the dark shape hanging above the horizon, something inside him returned. Not fear, not anger, but a decision. If this was the end, he wouldn't run from it. Far across the ocean, a young researcher sat inside a dimly lit lab. She had been working on artificial intelligence for years, always dreaming of building something that could help humanity. But now her hands trembled as she typed, trying to reach out through any channel still working. Maybe, just maybe, she could tap into their signals. Maybe she could understand what they were doing. In a bunker below an old UN building, a language specialist read through ancient texts, comparing patterns. He had once studied forgotten languages for fun. Now those old symbols suddenly meant something. He had seen similar marks on cave walls in South America. Strange spirals and lines long ignored by the world. But now they were on the ships hovering above Earth. None of these people were heroes. Not yet, they were just humans, caught in something far bigger than them. But each in their own quiet way was about to become part of a story that would shape history. Back in the cities, the attacks continued, slowly, methodically. It was clear now the invaders weren't here to talk. They weren't here to negotiate. They weren't looking to trade or explore or learn. They were here with a plan, A cold, calculated plan to take Earth not all at once, not in a flash, but piece by piece. Still, humanity didn't give up. Even in the chaos, small groups started forming. Old military units reconnected. Scientists from different countries shared whatever data they could. Underground radio stations popped up. People sent messages using old ham radios. One word kept repeating, resist. People started fighting back, not with missiles, but with ideas. With courage. With unity. A group of teenagers used drones to distract a ship hovering above their neighborhood. They managed to guide the craft into a trap where an old, buried missile system still worked. It was the first one ever brought down. The video went viral before the internet fully collapsed. Somewhere in the mountains, villagers used mirrors and sunlight to blind smaller ships. It worked, not for long, but it gave others hope. Every little success was shared across whatever communication lines remained. Still, the damage was beyond belief. In one day, Earth lost more lives than any war in history. Entire cities were gone, families broken, governments powerless. The sky was no longer a symbol of hope. It was a reminder that we weren't alone. And not all visitors come in peace. But as the sun set on that first terrible day, something changed. People began to rise. Not all. Not loudly. Not with banners or speeches. But in quiet ways, a man in a wheelchair rolled out into the street and helped lift a child from the rubble. A woman who had lost everything still handed out water bottles to strangers. A group of school teachers turned their classroom into a safe shelter, teaching children even as the world burned around them, because that's what humans do. We fall. We cry, we break, but we don't stay down. They hit Earth first, and they hit hard. But that day, that dark, terrible day, something inside the human spirit woke up. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hatred. It was about survival, about protecting what mattered, about making sure that even if we lost everything else, we didn't lose our will to fight for each other. The sky had changed. The world had changed. But deep inside, something stronger had begun to grow. Hope, and with hope came resistance. The first day was disaster. Everyone felt it. Everyone saw it. The sky had never looked the same after that. Cities had fallen. Communications were broken. Entire countries were offline. Satellites either stopped working or showed nothing but static. It was like Earth had been cut off from the rest of the universe, locked in its own nightmare. But after the first wave of destruction, something strange happened. The alien ships and the ones floating over cities, oceans, deserts, and forests didn't move. They just stayed there, watching, waiting. No more white lights, no more attacks, just silence. That silence made people nervous. People thought maybe it was over. Maybe they had finished whatever they came to do. Or maybe they were planning something worse. The waiting was painful. Even the wind felt heavier. In the middle of that stillness, small groups of people started coming out from hiding. Some had been trapped in basements, tunnels, or even car parking garages for days. Others had been staying in forests, mountains, or villages that had been untouched. They looked up at the sky, saw the ship still there, and wondered, why did it stop? The world was broken but not finished. People started searching for others. Survivors, family, strangers. It didn't matter anymore who you were before. Rich, poor, famous, forgotten. Everyone was the same now. Just human. In one corner of the world, a man walked through what was once a busy highway. Cars were everywhere, doors open, belongings scattered. He called out for anyone still alive. Most of the time, there was no answer. But one time, a small voice called back. A child hiding under a seat in a bus. The man didn't say much. He just picked the child up, gave him his jacket, and walked away, not looking back. Far away, in a ruined library, a small group of scientists and students gathered around a table. There was no electricity, but they had paper, pens, and their minds. They were trying to understand what these ships were. Not just what they looked like, but why they were here. One of them found a pattern in the ship's movement, or rather the lack of movement. It was almost like the ships weren't machines, but something alive. Meanwhile, in an underground room somewhere in the middle of the mountains, a radio operator finally picked up a weak signal, a voice broken and full of static. Is anyone... Copy in north. Safe. Repeating. The message wasn't clear, but it was enough. That night, under a dark and quiet sky, people gathered around small fires, sharing what little food and water they had. Some shared stories of how they escaped. Some cried. Some just stared into the flames. But slowly a question started to grow in people's minds. What did they want? Why did they come here? And then the world learned something terrifying. In one of the downed alien ships, the only one that humans had managed to bring down, using a risky trap and a lucky shot, a team of engineers and scientists worked without rest. The ship was heavily damaged but still holding pieces of its systems. After days of digging through strange wires, glowing surfaces and floating panels that didn't even follow normal physics, they found something, a data map. Not just any map, but a star map. And not just of the universe, but of Earth. The map showed Earth from long ago, thousands of years ago. It wasn't recent. It showed rivers that no longer existed, mountains before they were shaped by earthquakes, and coastlines that had changed over centuries. This was old, that changed everything. It meant one thing: they had been here before, long before pyramids, long before cities, long before we thought anyone else knew we existed, but there was more. On the ship's damaged walls, strange markings were found. Lines and symbols. Some of them matched carvings found in caves across the world, in deserts, jungles, and ice-covered lands. These carvings had been seen by archaeologists for years, but no one knew what they meant. Now it all made sense. The aliens had been here before and they left their marks, but why? An old theory started to rise again, one that had always been laughed at. That Earth had been visited in ancient times by something not human. Some had called it myth, legend, fantasy. Now it was real, and it got even worse. One scientist, going through more of the ship's files, discovered strange biological data. At first, it looked like random codes. But after days of study, she realized what it was. DNA records. Earth DNA. Human DNA. The aliens had been studying us, not just now, but since the beginning. Watching us grow, fight, build, destroy. For thousands of years, Earth wasn't just some random place they found. We were part of a long plan. We were their target all along. But that wasn't the worst part. In another ship fragment, a military team found an old message, buried deep in alien language. After weeks of decoding, it became clear Earth wasn't their first harvest. It was just the next. They had done this before. Many times. To other planets. Other species. They arrived, watched, waited, and then took what they needed. Energy, resources, life. Then they left, cold, quiet, efficient. We were never chosen. We were just next. That realization hit the remaining world leaders hard. Some cried. Some shouted. Others sat in silence. But after that moment, something changed. Fear turned into determination. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about winning. It was about survival. About protecting what was left of Earth. And making sure we weren't wiped out like the others. A call went out across the broken world. Unite. The few countries still able to communicate agreed to put aside all differences. No more borders. No more arguments. Just one goal. Defense. Engineers started building underground bunkers powered by old-school generators and solar tech. Farmers shared food with scientists. Mechanics turned buses into mobile shelters. Coders worked on creating communication lines using broken satellites. People started fighting back, not with hate, but with ideas. In a small town, an old man who used to repair radios turned his shop into a signal hub. He taught young people how to send messages using old frequencies. In a forest village, a group of builders created simple traps using mirrors and heat, confusing the alien sensors. In the snow-covered north, villagers found a way to reflect the ship's scanning beams, hiding entire areas from view. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't powerful, but it was human, and humans adapt. Around the world, whispers turned into plans. People weren't just hiding now. They were preparing, studying, learning, finding patterns in the invaders' behavior. One scientist discovered that the alien crafts avoided water during certain hours. Another found that the ships couldn't detect deep caves. Every piece of information became part of the puzzle. Meanwhile, those who had military training began organizing civilians, not to fight directly, but to survive smartly. Hide during scans, move during storms, communicate using light and sound patterns. It was slow, it was messy, but it was the beginning of resistance, and even though many were scared, deeply scared, they kept going. Because they had no other choice. They had already lost too much. But what they had left they would protect with everything they had, because the world had changed. The rules had changed, but the heart of humanity hadn't. We were still here, and as long as even one person was still standing, Earth wasn't finished. The world had changed. Everyone knew it. Nobody needed to say it out loud anymore. You could feel it in the air, in the silence of empty streets, in the way people looked at the sky with tired eyes. But something else had changed too. Something deeper. People had stopped waiting for help. They had stopped hoping that someone else, some government, some army, some superhero, would come and save them. They had decided to fight back, not with rage, not with hate, but with a quiet kind of courage that doesn't show up in the news. The kind of courage that makes you get up in the morning even when you're scared. The kind that keeps you moving even when you're exhausted. The invaders hadn't attacked again yet. Their ships still floated silently above cities and landscapes, like giant shadows frozen in the sky. They weren't moving, but they were watching. People didn't trust the quiet anymore. That's why the survivors were using the time wisely. In an abandoned factory, deep in a ruined city, a group of engineers and mechanics were working day and night. They didn't have much. Broken parts, old machines, melted wires, but they made it work. They were building tools, shields, and makeshift weapons out of scrap metal. Not because they thought they could defeat the ships in the sky, but because they had to try. Nearby, a few people trained civilians, not to become soldiers, but survivors. How to move quietly, how to stay out of scanning zones, how to treat wounds, how to work as a team. It wasn't about strength. It was about smart thinking, staying calm under pressure and trusting each other. In the mountains, a scientist had discovered something strange while studying fragments of a damaged alien device. It was small, like a cube, and it floated in the air without support. But what caught her attention was the strange hum it made when placed near water. At first it seemed random, but after several tests, she noticed a pattern. The cube reacted to human emotion. It hummed louder when someone nearby was angry, softer when someone was calm. When people laughed, the color inside the cube shifted. The scientist didn't know what it meant yet, but one thing was clear. The invaders were not just watching the outside world. They were observing something else, something inside us. Maybe they were trying to understand us. Or maybe they already had. In a small village, a boy who had lost his family found an old laptop that somehow still worked. He didn't know much, but he remembered a few things his older brother had taught him. He connected the laptop to a solar panel, opened a coding program, and started sending short messages, beacons, into the air, hoping someone would respond. After 3 days, someone did. A woman in another country who had been doing the same thing. They couldn't talk clearly, but they started sharing locations, safe spots, what the aliens seemed to avoid. This was the beginning of something new. A quiet, underground network of humans. No leaders, no headquarters, just people helping people, exchanging knowledge, sharing hope. Meanwhile, in a deep bunker, a group of linguists, artists, and historians were decoding a strange set of images found in an alien drone. They weren't words. They weren't sounds. They were visuals and shapes, movement, color shifts. At first it looked like random designs, but the more they watched, the more they realized it wasn't random at all. It was communication, and even more shocking when some of those shapes matched symbols found in ancient ruins around the world. Places that had no connection to each other. Places separated by oceans and thousands of years. This proved it. The invaders had been here before. Long before modern history, they had been watching humans evolve, maybe guiding us, maybe using us. Nobody could say for sure yet, but one thing was certain: we were not a surprise to them. We were part of their plan. That realization sparked something inside people. It wasn't just about saving Earth anymore. It was about protecting humanity's right to exist freely, to grow, to make mistakes, to build, to love, to live without being controlled by something else. And so, resistance took a new form. In forests, people built hidden shelters with walls made of living trees to avoid heat sensors. In the desert, mirrors were used to create false landscapes, confusing the invaders' mapping systems. In cities, old underground tunnels became secret schools where children learned everything, from science to survival, because knowledge was now the most powerful weapon. And in the middle of all this, someone figured out how to hack into a small alien drone. It wasn't easy. The tech was nothing like anything on Earth. But after weeks of testing, they managed to send a false command. The drone followed it, just for 5 seconds before crashing. But it was enough to give people hope. If they could hijack even one piece of alien tech, maybe they could do more. Another team of scientists working from an abandoned observatory discovered something hidden in the invaders' frequency signals. Every few hours, the alien craft sent out short pulses, too short for most systems to notice. But they were always the same, almost like a heartbeat. It was a wild theory, but some scientists believed the ships were not machines in the way humans understood machines. Maybe they were part living. Maybe they were connected by thought or instinct. That's why they didn't fly like jets or float like balloons. They moved like something alive. And they behaved like a hive. If that was true, it opened new possibilities. Maybe the invaders had a central mind, a core ship, or being, controlling them all. If it could be located, maybe Earth had a chance to stop them all at once. It was risky. It was a long shot, but it was better than waiting. Across the broken world, people started hearing a new phrase on radios, in letters, even painted on old buildings. They are not gods. They can bleed. This wasn't just a message. It was a belief that no matter how advanced the invaders were, they weren't perfect. They had weaknesses. They could be studied, fooled, fought. It gave people the courage to push forward. In one region, a group of farmers managed to trap a scout drone by luring it into a valley and collapsing the rocks above it. In another place, schoolchildren created a system of reflective panels that caused a ship to misread their village as empty land. Each success was small, but powerful, because each one proved that humans weren't finished. Not yet. One evening, as the sun was setting, a group of survivors sat around a fire, staring up at the alien ship that hovered above their town. They were tired, hungry. Some had lost family. Some had nothing left, but they all knew one thing. They were still human, and being human meant they could adapt. They could resist. They could rebuild. One person stood up and said, "They hit us first. They came here thinking we would fall in fear, but they don't know who we are." Another added, "We're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for our right to be here, to exist." The fire crackled. The sky was still full of shadows. The war was far from over, but in that moment, there was something stronger than fear. Unity. Across mountains, forests, deserts, cities, and villages, people who had never met, never spoken, never even known each other existed, were now part of one silent, growing movement. They were farmers, scientists, children, teachers, soldiers, elders, everyone, different languages, different faiths, different lives, but one purpose: to protect Earth, to protect each other, and to make sure that those who hit Earth first would never get the chance to do it again. The more people learned, the more serious everything became. For weeks, Earth had been studying the invader, not just their weapons, but their patterns, their history, their reason for being here. What began as panic had slowly turned into planning. Survivors were not just hiding anymore. They were thinking, observing, connecting pieces of a huge, dark puzzle. And one day, a piece finally clicked into place. From a half-destroyed alien drone, something strange was recovered. A memory core buried deep inside the machine. It was heavily damaged, but after days of careful work, a group of scientists managed to open a small part of it. What they found changed everything. It wasn't a weapon blueprint. It wasn't a map. It was a message not for humans, but from the aliens themselves. A communication between two of their crafts, sent months before the invasion. And it was in a different tone than anyone expected. They weren't planning a war. Not in the way humans think of war. They weren't here for power or control. They were here because they had no choice. They were running their own world, and wherever it was, one had collapsed. Their sun was dying. Their planets were ruined. They had lost everything, and Earth was their last hope. But they didn't ask for help. They didn't talk. They simply came to take. The message was cold, without emotion. It spoke about Earth as a harvest planet, a place they had visited long ago and marked for future use. Not because of its beauty or life, but because it was useful, full of energy, water, and a species that could either be ignored or removed. humans. We were seen not as equals, not even as enemies, but as insects standing in the way of survival. This truth hit the survivors hard. Some people felt a strange sadness. Were these aliens really so different from us? They were just trying to live, to survive. But others reminded everyone they chose violence first. They never spoke. They never asked. They came with silence and left behind destruction. Whatever their reason, the choice was theirs. And now, humans had made their choice too. The world couldn't go back to the way it was. But it could still be saved, piece by piece. Across every continent, groups of survivors began sharing this new information. Through hidden radios, hand-delivered letters, and hacked communication lines, the message spread. The invaders were not gods. They were desperate, and desperation could be used against them. A scientist who had spent years studying energy patterns discovered something else. The invaders' ships needed to recharge. Every few days, they would slowly rise higher into the sky, absorbing energy from the sun. During those hours, their defenses were weaker. That was the window. Plans began to form. In several places, people prepared traps, using light reflections, sound pulses, and even underground explosions to confuse the sensors of the ships during their recharge cycle. One such plan worked. In a dusty town surrounded by desert, a group of engineers and builders set up a trap using old mirrors from cars, satellite dishes, and broken solar panels. When the ship above them rose for its recharge, they activated the trap. For just a few seconds, the ship's sensors went blind. It started to drift, then crash. The sound was like thunder. The earth shook. A giant cloud of dust filled the sky, and for the first time since the invasion began, a major ship was taken down by human hands. Not luck, not accident. A plan. The world celebrated in silence. No parties, no loud cheers, just quiet looks of hope, smiles, a spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. But inside that crashed ship was something far more valuable than expected. Not just tech, not just wires and metal. There was a being, not dead, not alive, somewhere in between. It was the first alien body humans had ever seen up close. Strange, tall, skin like stone, but soft like jelly. No mouth, no eyes. Only glowing lines across its surface pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Scientists took no joy in examining it. They treated it carefully, almost respectfully. But what they found was shocking. This being had no organs. No heart, no stomach, no brain in the way humans understand. It was like a living machine, part biology, part technology, and most surprising of all, it had traces of human DNA inside it. This opened a terrifying question. Were they copying us? One researcher remembered the ancient message found weeks ago. The aliens had been watching us for centuries. What if they weren't just observing, but studying, experimenting, becoming more like us? It wasn't just Earth they were after. It was humanity itself. This made everything even more serious. If the invaders could copy human DNA, they could eventually use our form against us. Blend in, replace us. That possibility could not be ignored. So a new order was made. Protect the living, but study the enemy. A small group of scientists began working on something called the Mirror Code, a system to detect life that wasn't fully human. A way to spot if the invaders ever took human form. It wasn't finished yet, but it was the start of a defense plan. Elsewhere, survivors kept fighting in quiet ways. A group of musicians used sound waves to create frequencies that disrupted the alien sensors. In another country, farmers used heat signatures from animals to trick alien drones into scanning the wrong areas. Even children helped, drawing maps of safe zones, creating signals with light, keeping watch while adults worked. This was no longer a fight between armies, it was a fight of people. All people, working together, and the invaders for the first time began to react. Some of their ships moved, not in big attacks but small, quiet changes. They began scanning deeper, slower, almost as if they were confused. Their perfect plan was being disturbed. Humans were supposed to be weak, divided, emotional, but now we were strong, united, focused, and that scared them. In the middle of all this, something else happened. One of the decoded alien messages revealed coordinates, not of Earth but of another planet. A place they had taken before. A world once filled with life, now silent and dark. A few brave explorers using old satellites and telescopes managed to view this planet from afar. It was true. The planet was dead. No light, no green, no water, just dust. That was the future Earth would face if the invaders won. This image spread across the resistance, a final warning. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting to protect life itself. Every plant, every animal, every child, everything that made Earth home. So people kept building, kept teaching, kept sharing. In the sky, the alien ships still floated, but they were not as still anymore. Some shifted, some drifted, some blinked with strange lights. Maybe they were watching us more closely now. Maybe they were afraid, and they should be, because humans had stopped being afraid. We had learned, we had adapted, we had stood back up, we had remembered what made us strong. Not our weapons, but our hearts, our unity, and our will to protect what matters. We were not waiting for help. We had become the help, and the message was clear. They hit Earth first, but Earth was hitting back. The sky was still full of them, dark, silent ships floating far above the ground like shadows that refused to leave. They were massive, covering whole cities with their presence. Some hadn't moved for weeks. Others shifted now and then, almost like they were listening, watching. But something had changed. They weren't the only ones watching anymore. Humans had started watching back. From underground bunkers, forests, deserts, mountain hideouts, people had become the eyes of the Earth. Every movement, every pulse, every sound the invaders made was recorded and shared. A global map of resistance was being built, bit by ordinary people using broken tech and hand-drawn sketches. The invaders were no longer the only ones with a plan. Across different countries, small human teams were moving in secret. They weren't soldiers, not in the usual way. Some were builders, others were teachers, doctors, drivers, even kids. But they were all doing something important, carrying knowledge, helping people, spreading survival techniques, and gathering intel. The world had become a giant network of survivors, and together, they were slowly learning how to fight back. The crashed alien ship from before had given humanity a lot. Not just a glimpse into the enemy's biology and purpose, but clues about how their systems worked. A few scientists, using only scraps of tech and endless patience, had managed to build something small. A signal jammer. It couldn't bring down a ship. It couldn't destroy anything, but it could block one ship from communicating with the others for a few minutes. And that was enough. During one operation, a small team used the jammer to isolate a ship that hovered over an old city center. While it was cut off, they placed reflective shields all around it, panels made from broken mirrors and solar plates. When the ship tried to scan, it got nothing but confused readings. It thought the area was empty, so it moved on. That moment wasn't a big victory, but it saved hundreds of lives hiding underground. Sometimes survival is the victory. In the mountains, a new base was being built, not by military forces but by volunteers. People from different backgrounds, languages, and beliefs came together to work side by side. They didn't ask where anyone was from. They didn't care. The only question that mattered was, are you here to help? Food was grown in hidden gardens. Water was collected from rain and snow. Old batteries were recharged using wind and solar power. Children were taught not just how to read and write, but how to think and how to question, create, and adapt. This new generation was growing up in a world unlike any before. They didn't have playgrounds or video games, but they had purpose, and purpose was powerful. While the world worked in quiet corners, a group of scientists finally found what they had been searching for, the core signal. It was the main pulse that connected all the ships. Every few hours it sent out a wave like a digital heartbeat, keeping all ships in sync. It wasn't easy to track. It jumped across frequencies like a ghost. But once they found it, they knew what it meant. There was a central ship, a main source, a control point. It wasn't on Earth's surface. It was far above, beyond the clouds, hidden in orbit like a silent king watching over its army. The invaders had built this massive core ship to control the rest. It was their brain, their hive. If that ship could be reached or even disturbed, everything might fall apart. But how could humans reach it? They had no working space tech. Most satellites were gone. Planes couldn't even get close. The invaders would shoot down anything flying high within seconds. Still, people didn't give up. In a remote location, an old aerospace engineer came out of hiding. He had once worked on space missions before everything fell apart. Now, with a team of young minds, he started working on something that felt impossible, turning a grounded space shuttle prototype into something real. The shuttle had no power system, no working engine, no navigation software. It was never supposed to fly, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the idea. Across the globe, pieces were gathered: old rocket parts, fuel cells, stabilizers. Every piece was carried by hand, truck, or boat. People risked their lives just to move one engine, but nobody complained. They all knew what it meant. Earth's first real counterstrike was being born, and while the shuttle was being rebuilt, another team worked on the second half of the plan, a way to use the aliens' own technology against them. From the fallen ships, small pieces of tech were being extracted: gravity plates, shielding cores, strange cables that moved like muscles. Bit by bit, humans were learning how to understand the tech. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to build a hybrid, part human, part alien. A craft that could possibly escape detection for a few minutes. Enough time to reach orbit. Even that slim chance was worth trying, everywhere. People were preparing, not for an all-out war. Humanity still wasn't strong enough for that, but for a strike. A single, targeted hit. If the core ship could be damaged, even slightly, it might confuse the others. Shut them down, slow them. Give Earth time to recover, rebuild, and fight harder. The plan had risks. Many. The pilot of the craft would likely not return. The team that launched it might be found. There was no guarantee of success, but someone still volunteered, not a hero. Just a person. They didn't give a speech. They didn't ask for thanks, they just said one thing: if I don't try, who will? The launch was scheduled for the darkest hour before dawn. The ship wasn't perfect and it shook when powered on. It hummed with strange alien energy. But it worked. Everyone stood in silence, not because they were afraid, but because they finally believed again. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The ground trembled. The sky lit up and the ship rose, straight into the clouds, higher than any bird, past the black smoke, through the cold wind toward the place no human had reached since the invasion began. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, silence. They lost connection. No message. No return signal. People feared the worst. But minutes later, the invaders reacted. Suddenly, their ships pulsed red, not all at once, but in waves. A few dropped lower. Some blinked. Others began shifting oddly, like something inside was broken or confused, and for the first time, one ship vanished completely, not crashed, not fallen, just disappeared. The signal had worked. The pilot had reached the core. Something had changed. The control system was damaged. The hive was confused. This was Earth's moment, not victory, not yet, but momentum. And that's when humanity sent a message, not with weapons, not with threats, but with a broadcast, hijacked through old satellites and alien tech. The message was simple. You came in silence. You attacked without mercy. You called us insects, but now you've seen what insects can do. We're not finished. We're just beginning. This is our home, and we will not give it to you. As the message ended, people all over the world stood taller. They weren't hiding anymore. The resistance wasn't a rumor now. It was real. It had a voice, and that voice was growing louder every day. The world was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence before something important, like the air holding its breath just before a storm passes, or a city waiting to wake up after a long night. Something had changed in the skies ever since the launch, the one made by the hybrid craft built with both human and alien parts. The invaders hadn't reacted the same. Their ship still floated, but now they moved less, flickered strangely, and scanned more slowly. One even disappeared completely. People noticed. For the first time since the invasion began, there was real visible weakness. And when that happened, something else came alive. Hope, but it wasn't the soft, Quiet hope that sits in the corner of a dream. No, this was sharp, strong, and focused. It was a hope made of action. People didn't just talk about survival anymore. They worked harder. They shared more. They trained. They learned. The feeling was everywhere. In a mountain village, a teenager who used to be scared to leave his shelter now led groups of elders to safety through hidden paths. In a burned-down town, a group of teachers turned a broken bus into a mobile school. Kids sat on tires and broken crates learning how to rebuild the future. People who had nothing left still gave what little they could. Food, stories, time. No one was waiting to be saved anymore. They were becoming the saviors. And far above them, the invaders felt it. They didn't speak in words. They didn't scream or panic. But their patterns changed. Some ships pulled away. Some hovered farther from cities. Their once perfect system had cracks. Now, whatever had happened to their core ship had shaken their control. And humans weren't done. The scientists and engineers who had built the first hybrid craft were already working on a second one. Smaller, faster, and this time remote-controlled. They didn't want to risk another life. Technology was now a tool humans were learning to shape, even if it came from their enemy. Old labs reopened. Libraries became learning centers. Anything with even one working computer was used to teach people how to code, how to think, how to solve. The new world didn't need more fear. It needed more minds. At the same time, strange messages began appearing in the invaders' signals, hidden inside the data pulses. Something different. Not commands, not threats, just symbols, circles, lines, patterns that repeated. At first, humans thought it was just static, noise. But an artist who had once studied ancient languages noticed something. These symbols looked familiar, not in design, but in feeling. They matched the carvings found in old places, caves, stones, temples from thousands of years ago, places where humans had once believed they were visited by beings from the stars. Could it be that the invaders had once come in peace? Or maybe, long ago, they weren't invaders at all. Maybe they had watched humans grow, then left, and now they were back, not to guide, but to take. But Earth wasn't the same anymore. Humans had grown, not just in number but in spirit. Now, they had something the invaders never understood: connection. It wasn't about machines or weapons. It was about people, strangers helping strangers, children teaching elders, engineers working with farmers, old memories shared like seeds planted in fresh soil. Earth had become one heart beating in many places, and that heartbeat was growing louder. A few weeks after the first ship disappeared, another one fell, not destroyed, but shut down. Its lights died. It dropped slowly into a forest, not crashing, but surrendering like it had simply stopped. It was empty, no pilot, no tools, just silence. Scientists studied it carefully and found something unexpected. The ship had turned itself off, as not from damage, but from confusion. It had received a command that didn't make sense, like it had lost its reason to continue. Maybe, just maybe, the core was losing its power to control. That's when people began to say something quietly, passing it from mouth to mouth, radio to radio, note to note. We're winning, not with guns, not with war, but with belief. One more hybrid ship was built, then another, each one tested carefully, used to explore areas once too dangerous. They were small, simple, unmanned. But they gave humans eyes in the sky again, and what they saw shocked everyone. More ships were drifting, not retreating, not attacking, just floating, empty, as if something inside them had broken, or been freed. A theory began to form. What if not all the ships were enemies? What if some were alive, trapped in the system, controlled by a mind that no longer had full power? And what if the human spirit, our chaos, our unity, our unpredictability, had shaken that control loose? One final mission was planned. This time it wasn't to attack. It was to send a message, not just to the invaders, but to any consciousness that still listened. Using a mix of human tech and alien signals, they sent a pulse. A simple one, repeating only two things: this is Earth. We choose life, no threats, no demands, just truth. For 3 days there was no answer. Then, lights in the sky, all over the world, The ships that had hovered above cities, frozen for so long, began to move, slowly, rising higher, turning toward the stars. One by one. No explosions. No war cries. They left. Not all. Some stayed behind, but silent, harmless. Like empty shells. People waited, afraid it was a trick. But days passed. Then weeks and nothing happened. The ships that remained slowly lost power. They shut down. Some were taken apart and studied. Others were left alone like monuments to what had happened. The sky, for the first time in months, was clear. No shadows. Just clouds. Sun, stars, and hope. Earth had survived, not because it was stronger, but because it refused to give up. Because humans remembered what made them powerful. Not anger, not violence, but each other. People began to rebuild. Cities rose again, not the same as before, but better, wiser, slower. Technology was respected. Nature was protected. No one forgot what had happened, but they also didn't let fear shape the future. A day was chosen, 1 year after the invaders arrived, to be remembered as Earth Day. Not a day of fear, but of unity. On that day, people everywhere stood under the open sky, hand in hand, eyes lifted, and remembered they were hit first, but they stood together, and because of that, they were still here.